ברוכים הבאים לכולם מירושלים. The new episode of Israelities Podcast, live from Jerusalem.
Shalom lekulam from Jerusalem. Stefano here, your host of Israelities Podcast. And we are ready for a new episode. And today we have Pastor Daniel.
Hello.
From Hertzliya.
From Hertzliya.
But you are wearing so many a different hat here, a King of Kings. Yes, which is good. I mean, you look like Pastor Chad, but you are no Pastor Chad.
I am not.
So it's so good to have you. Where is
Thank you.
Pastor Daniel coming from?
He is coming from Germany
Yeah.
originally, and I've been living here for 12 years,
Wow.
2012.
And that you are still very young, as you said before, off camera. That I need to
Yes.
say that you are still very young, and you are, despite all the big responsibility you have. So tell us more about your background. So born in Germany, what's your studies like? What your expertise?
Oh, my expertise.
If any.
I don't know if there are any. I'm average in all these different things. My background, what is my background? Well, born and raised in Germany. My dad was a pastor for many years. Then he started to lead a ministry supporting ministries here in Israel. As a family, we've been coming to Israel very regularly. And I did so in Germany back in 2006, I believe it was, male guys still had to go to the army still for 9 months. But we had the option also to opt out from it and do what we call like a social service in hospitals, in elderly homes. And I took that path and went to Israel because we actually could do it here. And served here for 1 year in a hospital, in a rehabilitation center in Tel Aviv. And a few years later, I went back during summer break and met my wife there. She's from Canada.
Wow.
And that's where we met. My educational background would be human resources. And then once I came here on board at King of Kings, I did my Master of Divinity at Liberty University in America, online.
That's good. I'm very interested to know how a German lad at school hears about Israel. After the Second War and everything that happened between Germany and Israel, I would like to know what's the kind of teaching happening for a kid in the school in Germany. Are they mentioning something? Are they trying to be sensitive, use sensitive language? And
yeah, we talk about it, and it depends obviously from the level of school you're in. Sometimes it goes deeper, sometimes not. But yeah, it's certainly something we try to educate the young people on. There are different. If you're city partners with like an Israeli city here in Israel, there's school or student exchanges. We would go to concentration camps sometimes. So that's all part of our history. We don't want to hide it. We try to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's a different story maybe living here in Israel. I don't get I think one time in my entire life I had a negative experience because of my German background. However, my 6-year-old daughter actually had something coming up this year, which we weren't prepared for. She is in school, first grade, and as you know, here in Israel we celebrate the different Memorial Days or the Independence Day, but also Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it's a big topic at school, and also in grade 1, kids talk about it. Teachers talk about it, and I think that's very good. She came back home and said that one of her friends said, well, ask her, hey, did your father kill someone? Did your father kill Jewish people? And she was like, no. Well, he is German, so I don't want to be a friend of yours anymore. So she came home with that message. We talked to her mom, and she apologized, like very deeply, and she said she's going to talk to her daughter, and it's all fine, but it shows it's a matter of education on both sides, and what we on our part as parents needed to do is just to tell the teachers, listen, our children have some German background. Part of the message that you should maybe bring in and teach your children is, yes, this happened, but Germany is in a different situation now. The relationship has changed dramatically nowadays. I think the most volunteers here in Israel from abroad are from Germany. So many young people actually come to Israel and serve.
Very good point. And do you think that your education in Germany influenced you to love Israel already in the early stage?
No, not at all.
No. It's more your parents'
It's
side?
really my parents. Okay. We moved. So when my dad was a pastor, he received a calling that God called my parents to do a sabbatical here in Israel. So as a family in 1993, we moved here for 1 year, and that was really the beginning of us falling in love with the people, with the land, and ever since we came back. And funny part was that we lived here in Jerusalem. We attended King of Kings Community Jerusalem back then in the YMCA in the early stages. So that was fun with the Hillston boys, I guess, as well. They're a little bit older than us, but we saw them as well and went to Sunday school, I guess. I don't know what it was called back then. And then 20 years later, basically, we're invited to join the staff at King of Kings to lead and to lead that ministry actually again here in Israel.
And you started here at KCJ, the youth group.
Yes.
Which I'm leading now.
Yes.
So I'm following your footprint.
Yeah, King of Kings invited my wife, actually. I think they knew she was married by then. Okay. And I came alongside. I was allowed to join as well. And then I supported my wife in the children's ministry, and then started that youth group that you're now leading and doing a much better job than
I don't know.
So I'm
not
very
sure. It was very big number when you run it. And we're still quite few.
Well, you're
35,
you have
40.
more kids than you're doing a great job.
Thank you, because you need to know also that Daniel is my boss. So if he says so, I take it.
You better.
In fact, you, as I said before, there are so many things you do. Like you are the HR manager, right? So you run the HR of KKM, the whole ministry, right?
It sounds like a big task. It really
but that's
is
what you do.
Not so much. Yes.
So it's not just in Jerusalem. It's all our congregation at Keilot are under your human resources department.
Yes.
Tell us something about it. How is the task? Is it complicated to deal with people? I know you have a degree, but one thing is to study HR on books. And another thing is dealing with real people.
Yeah, putting into practice what you learn. Mm-hmm. But it's probably one of the easier tasks here. I mean, the people we have on the team are great. So
you say something different off camera, by the way.
Off camera, I mean, with Stefano, yes. We can go into your HR file and take it apart. Yeah. No, I'm kidding. No, it's great. It's very easy. It's fun. I like it. I like the different areas and hope I can bring a little bit to the table with that. Yeah, I enjoy it. It wasn't really existing when I joined. We really had to start with contracts and all of that and getting into the Israeli system. I mean, with pension, with all the different salary things is new or was new to me. So
you're doing a great job. I know that both Pastor Mike and Pastor Chad and also Pastor Veiko, they are very fond on the work you're doing in your technicality and precision and all these kind of things. But that's not just, it's just a part of you. Yeah. The other part is like you are a pastor, You are a minister. Now you're running and leading the congregation in Hertzliya, which is a beautiful, beautiful city. But as you said before, you were part of KKCJ. You were living in Jerusalem, serving here in Jerusalem, joined the staff in Jerusalem. How the transition happened between Jerusalem to Hertzliya? Is it something that you started from scratch? That Kayla was already there? How did it happen?
Yeah, very good question. I don't know how it all happened. So
it must be God.
It must have. Well, it certainly was. In 2013, around that year, Pastor Wayne came across a survey where the result was that there were only at that time 2 cities in Israel without a messianic congregation. So with that, he brought that to the executive team, and that team started to pray for direction, and God put different pieces into place where it was obvious, I want King of Kings to do something in Hertzliya. So we sent 2 couples, Daniel Geppert as the leader of that team and founder of, well, basically the congregation. But as you know, our strategy is to build congregations with community groups. So we planted a community group in Hertzliya with somebody from Hertzliya, a couple from Jerusalem, and that small group started to slowly grow. And at some point, they invited a pastor to take over that small group, and unfortunately, he had to leave the country after a very short amount of time, and then for another, I believe it was 20 weeks. Daniel Geppert took over again, and during that time, we as a team, King of Kings ministry team, for example, on our Tuesday morning staff prayers, we prayed for a new leader for that small group in Hertzliya. And Jeline, my wife, and I, we prayed together for that new leader, and it was not on our radar at all that this could be us. Like, we innocently prayed,
Lord, please send somebody. It's you.
Yeah. I knew Hertzliya a little bit. I was at the beach one time. Yeah. That was kind of all I knew from Hertzliya.
Where is Hertzliya on the map?
Hertzliya on the map is right above Tel Aviv. Okay. So it's on the coast. It's 5-6 miles, 10 kilometers north of the center of Tel Aviv. And so I was traveling with Pastor Chad in Germany, and I dropped him off at his hotel, and randomly, just on his way out, he's like, hey, what do you think about Hertzliya? Would you and Jeline consider and pray over taking over the leadership of that small group or the new congregation, because it was transitioning over to a congregation? And we did, and I'm not saying it was a loud voice that came down from heaven, but we felt peace. We felt really good about it. We felt, well, number one, also honored, but yeah, excited about it too. So that was kind of the beginning, and yeah,
What is Hertzliya known for? What's the target? What's the kind of people? Are more religious, Orthodox, Christian, Catholics? Is like, because we know very well about Jerusalem, the target. But what about Hertzliya? Is it a university city? Or?
Yeah, that was something important that we needed to learn and figure out in the next, months, years, basically. And even still, it's so diverse, so different. You have on one side the embassy people from like internationals. You have international students. You have local students. It's big startup city, but at the same time, you have the typical Israeli flair as well. Just downtown Hertzliya is like any other city as well, with the typical Israelis. It's certainly not as religious as Jerusalem. It's more laid back. My joke is you don't hear anybody honking in traffic other than my wife. So you can actually, this is what doesn't happen in Jerusalem. You can actually sit on a traffic light and it's green and nobody
Not like
cares?
Jerusalem.
Everybody's on their phone anyway. But in Jerusalem, they start honking already when it's red.
Yeah.
And the green signal should be coming up. So that's how this city rolls. It's very different. So we love it. At the beginning, I was like, because we commuted for 2 years, I was like, I can do this longer, but I didn't want to move to Hertzliya. Now I love it. I would not
come back to Jerusalem.
But with that process, it became so important especially for my wife. She was stuck in a nursery, didn't really get a sense of community in the first 2 years because my wife gave birth to our youngest, to Mila, really like 1 week after we got set in. And installed as pastors. So
you moved.
We moved
as she was pregnant.
Well, we took over the congregation in her last week of pregnancy.
Okay.
And
speaking of timing,
yes, very good timing. And for 2 years we commuted between Jerusalem and Hertzliya. But now, that was the right move. I would encourage everyone. You got to be where your people are.
Have you ever felt to be called to become a pastor? In the early stages of your life?
Good question.
Or something that is...
I have never desired it. That wasn't really big. And I also have to confess, I didn't work toward it. Although I received basically a clear word from God, from Matthew 10, and that's a little bit of a story. I finished an apprenticeship in a bank office, and you finish it with your final exams, and they didn't go as planned.
Like in Germany.
Yeah, the result wasn't great. So I was kind of disappointed by that, and went for a run that day when I got the results back, and came back and opened my Bible reading plan and led me to Matthew 10, and there it says, but rather go to the lost sheep of Israel and basically preach the gospel. This is what paraphrasing this says. I was 20 at the time, but it spoke to me. At the same time, I'm like, okay, that's quite of a big scripture and a word to receive. I didn't even know where to start. I didn't have that desire to, okay, let's go to Bible study, let's Bible college, or let's study theology, getting educated in that direction and trained. I actually started to study engineering for the beginning and then switched over to human resources. But God put things into place that led me to, getting where He sent me. And then 7 years later, we have arrived by then in Israel. But I think what He did over the next years after I received the word was to open myself up to being willing to His calling. And I had the question that really started to bug me. What is my answer going to be if one day I'm in the front of God's throne and God would ask me, why did you not go? And I think that's a good question for all of us, to ask. And many of us probably have a very good question. And I think calling is very important if you go into ministry. But maybe just the question, why not? And to be honest with yourself, that really opened myself up. So when the calling came from King of Kings, hey, would you, or when the invitation came from King of Kings to Chilean, would you consider going? That was immediately, yes, let's put everything to the side. We really want to go, and we're going. So that it was a long procedure, but a cool story looking back.
Yeah. What is the biggest challenge you have in ministering in Hertzliya and in Israel?
You.
In Hertzliya,
That's when you come. No,
I don't come so often.
Unfortunately, he's a great. You led worship once or twice.
Once.
I hope you come back. You're
I've never
great.
been invited again. So maybe it wasn't so
this
great.
Is my official invitation on air.
Be careful, you're
please
recorded.
Come back. And Daniela and the team would love to have you back as well.
You are.
And now I actually know how to introduce you properly as well, which is another story.
There's another story.
But anyway, what is the biggest challenge?
Yeah.
That's a good question because it's a great community. It's a great congregation. Really blessed. For example, just this week, we had 4 people graduating from the 9-month counseling course here at Anchor of Hope. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so many just have this heart of, I want to serve, and mature believers who kind of know their place, know their giftings, know where they want to get involved. So this is really, really cool with Pastor Matthew and his wife Daniela. We have a great team. So I think from that side, it's great. We see with the beginning of the war, I've never seen so many Israelis actually coming to faith. And we have many new believers in our congregation. We started a discipleship course that actually Pastor Matthew is heading up, and that's going really well. Getting them in and really like making sure they have a home, whether this is us or another congregation in the area where they attend and be, and I'm not just saying Saturdays services, but like where they get to be a part of, go deeper, grow in their faith, attend a community group. That's really important. Other challenges would really be on the financial side, for example. We're doing well, or we're doing okay financially, but what we started a few months ago is what we call the Ezra Project, and really trying to look forward to where are we going to be in 10, 15, 20 years financially, because our rent in general is just crazy here in Israel.
It is, yeah.
And the amounts that we have to pay, and just projecting what we would have to pay in 15, 20 years led us to a place where we sensed also from God that it would be a good time now to really start working toward fundraising for our own property.
Yeah.
So that's what the Ezra Project is what we're working on it.
Which is really unbelievable, and we thank God for that, because it's so fast growing, the congregation in Hertzliya. You started a very small group.
Yeah.
And when I came, I mean, it was packed.
Yeah.
So people even on the side, and it was really, really packed. And do you have any strategy for that? What was the strategy?
Yeah, I don't want to
so
say that's a
fast?
challenge. How we grew?
Yeah.
We have an amazing team, honestly. Like, this is what it is. And not just Jolene, myself, Matthew, and Daniela, but also like the Cohens, the Zairs, wonderful people, Piflags, awesome people that we have in the congregation.
People they love to serve.
I think one of the keys is really a solid, and not just a solid, like a really good children's ministry. I think getting families in, reaching out to families is what really helped us, making sure we are very consistent with what we offer and make sacrifices even for it. And we are very young. If you look at the ages of our, it's probably like 45 and 50 under. Like, that's really,
it's a young congregation.
it's very young. We usually have 20 to 30 kids at the congregation. There would be a big gap between 50 to probably 70, 80, where we probably only have 3-4 people in that age group.
And for what I've seen, you really love the community outside of the Keilah, outside of the congregation. Like, the congregation moves out and doing a lot of social help as well.
Yeah.
In particular way, during the war, you have been out there, one of the first of our congregation to be out there and to bring boxes, food to help families. Would you update us on that? Give us some more details for our listeners.
Yeah, with the beginning of the war, we really had on our heart to pray how God could use us, and I'm sure like we all had that prayer as well. How can we help? And we're all not like we're pastors, leaders, counselors, like all in that field, like ministry leaders, but we're not in like projects for aid, like for all these disasters. That's not really our first, not even priority, but like we're not set up for it.
Yes, yeah.
But we all had it in our heart, and we didn't have any connections, and they needed to build and be formed first. And through different people, we got connected to coordinators of different teams of soldiers, but also communities. And it was shocking a little bit how probably unprepared many of these communities were for disasters, for emergencies, like no generators, no walkie-talkie, like ways of communication, no really anything that you would think, okay, you really should have a few of these things in place. So that was really one way to get involved, and from there it just started. And really what was the second prayer was how can we use this to be a light, not just to be a help, but to be a light and to share God's love with these people. And that became important for us as well. And in general, I really see this war as a wake-up calling for the people of Israel to return to God. Mm-hmm. And what we see is that many actually, those who have been thinking, those who have been considering or looking into it a little bit before the war, many of them have actually made their decision and said, I want to follow Yeshua and accept him in my life. So that is really cool and was encouraging to see.
Yeah, and that's very, very good. And I know many people benefited from your help and the help of the congregation. And I think that we as KKM, like all our congregation, we just joined together to help. And this is something that it was really good to see the whole body moving and reaching as much as they can. So thank you so much. Do you have any advice for the people the young people that would like to start the ministry or begin their ministry? They feel the calling of God, but it's not there yet. I feel like you can be the best person to give this advice because you receive that kind of calling when you were 20, after almost failing your exam. And God spoke to you through Matthew 10. Yeah. But then it took a few years before you stepped into that kind of ministry, that liminal space, that space in which you are still waiting from the promise of God to be accomplished. I think there are so many people watching it or listening to this podcast that they may find themselves in that situation. So which kind of advice would you like to give to them?
That's a very good question.
That's why I'm the host.
Well, looking back at like that time, that 7 years, I don't want to say you got to wait for 7 years, but keep what you receive, keep it in your heart, and be open for it and see what God says and talk to others. I think that's what I would encourage young people. It's like talk to your pastor, talk to other leaders, talk to somebody in that field who has gone through it or who can help you, or communicate what you experience. I think that's kind of one important thing. And it is a leap of faith. But I think once if this is the right step, you will do it in full peace. And I like security. Yeah. I'm not in that way, I'm actually surprised at myself that I left everything behind, didn't come here without any income. We came here as volunteers with a very small stipend. So that was a risk. If you would have told me that before, I would have never thought I'd take it.
Yeah.
But you have that peace when it's the right move. So yeah, listen to that a little bit maybe as well.
And God rewarded these sacrifices.
Yeah, it's fun, and I think that's what it should be as well. You should be excited about it. If you're not excited about it, then something is off.
Yeah, it is.
So, yeah, check all these. I think make sure you have a calling. Make sure this is the right direction. Make sure you have peace over it. Make sure you talk to some others about that, and then enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Pastor Daniel, for your time.
Yeah,
I think we have great content over here. We're going to be such a blessing for the people watching it and listening to this podcast and this episode in particular way.
Thank you.
If you want to help Pastor Daniel and our Kayla in Hertzliya for the new project, Ezra project, you can get in touch with him or directly to our email address, which is podcast@kkm.network. Feel free to send emails if you want to have more information about what we are doing here in Jerusalem, but in particular way in Hertzliya. Pastor Daniel, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Stefano.
And shalom from Jerusalem.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Israelities Podcast. We'd love to hear your questions and comments at podcast@kkm.network. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram. Shalom from Jerusalem.